Hi, my name is Dr. Dave Kopacz, and I'm a psychiatrist, author. I'm a certified yoga instructor and a certified iRest meditation instructor as well. Uh, Over the course of my career, I've been very focused on physician well-being, self-care, caring for self. That's the name of my book that I wrote in 2024, Caring for Self and Others, Transforming Burnout, Compassion Fatigue, and Soul Loss. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is this book and some of the ideas in the book. Uh, I wrote this book in 2024. I thought of it as a kind of a sequel to my book from 2014, my first book, Rehumanizing Medicine. It's got a long subtitle, but I'll go ahead and read it. A holistic framework for transforming yourself, your practice, and the culture of medicine. So I wrote this book really with the idea of doctors and healthcare professionals figuring out how they could rehumanize themselves so that they could meet the full humanity of the patient or the client, the person they're working with. And the way I look at things is that if you don't develop that full humanity within yourself, you're not going to be able to recognize or meet that within the person you're working with. So this was my first book. This book in 2024, Caring for Self and Others, I'm looking at the idea of burnout, of like what happens in our jobs and our lives. And there's so much going on in the world right now where we just feel it's too much. Not only too much, but it's just too much, too much. Everything just piles on top of the next thing. And in our jobs, we're expected to be more efficient, more productive, and in healthcare, that means processing patients, processing people more and more quickly, turning them out, getting them in, getting them out, putting the billing codes in, maximizing your billing, maximizing the income for yourself or for the place that you're working so that they'll pay you more. And so much has kind of, I would say, devolved into a dehumanized approach to healthcare. Reducing people to numbers or statistics is dehumanizing. It's reductionistic. Humanizing is holistic. It's putting something together, putting all the pieces together, and working with something that's larger than just a dopamine pathway or a serotonin pathway or a trauma or a diagnosis. It's looking at the whole person, their hopes, their dreams, their desires, and helping them to lead a fulfilling life. And that can happen even with symptoms. It doesn't mean symptom reduction or symptoms will be eliminated. It just means that a person finds meaning and purpose within their lives. So in Caring for Self, this book that I wrote, I looked at the problem of burnout. And burnout is when your pilot light goes out. You're showing up, the lights are on, but nobody's home. You just feel like you've lost something inside of yourself. Another term for this is compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is when you just feel empty. You feel like you don't have anything more to give. And the third part of the title or subtitle, Burnout, Compassion Fatigue, the third part is soul loss. And I came to this idea working through with my friend Joseph Real, Beautiful Painted Arrow. We've written a number of books together, and he teaches from an indigenous perspective from the Southwest Pueblo and Southern Ute tribes. So, and from Joseph's perspective, when you lose your vitality, you've lost your soul. And you can regain your soul. It's something that comes and goes. It's not like a Christian, you've lost your soul and you're damned for all eternity. It's more of a give and take that you're trying to connect with the part of yourself that helps you feel vital, whole, empowered, alive. The feeling of being alive. So that's what I speak of when I talk about soul loss. So in this book, it's divided into a number of chapters that look at different levels of caring for self. So caring for the body, caring for emotions, caring for your mind, caring for your heart, caring for your creative self-expression or creativity, caring for your intuition, caring for spirit. And by spirit, I don't necessarily mean religion, but again, similar to soul, that part of you that feels alive and vital and engaged in the world. And then I also added a couple of other dimensions in Rehumanizing Medicine of caring for time, or development across time. We're all in different life stages at different points. And then also caring for our environment, caring for our context, our emotional context, interpersonal context, and our environmental ecosystems that we live in, to recognize that we're embedded in these ecosystems. And in caring for self and others, I added a 10th category of caring for all. So recognizing that at some point, the deeper you go into caring for yourself, it flips and you begin caring for everyone. You recognize that the self isn't something that's isolated, but the self is integrated and contextualized within a larger environment, and that we don't exist isolated from other people, but we exist in relationship to other people. And so really, if we're on a caring journey, the end of that caring journey is that we're not just caring for ourselves in isolation and stepping back, but we're stepping into relationship with others. We're stepping into relationship with our environment and ecosystem, and we're stepping into the flow of life, the intercontextual web of life. So that's kind of a brief overview of the structure of the book. One other point I think I'll mention in this introduction is I think I developed this idea of the technician and the healer, and I'm speaking now about primarily healthcare professionals or physicians, but really this can apply to everyone. Dehumanization, burnout can apply to everyone, although the specific examples I'm generally using are healthcare. So when you're in a technician mindset, you are in a reductionistic mode. You're looking at, how do I perform this function? How do I perform this protocol? How do I do this technical process? And that's very important for being a physician. It's very important for anything. You want to be competent in your field. However, if you're only a technician, you aren't necessarily being a good, compassionate human being and connecting to others in a human way. So that's what I think of as being a healer, and that we should develop our ability to be technicians and our ability to be healers as well. So being a healer is holistic, it's humanistic, it's developing ourselves, it's helping others develop themselves. Healing isn't just about symptom reduction, as I mentioned earlier. You could help somebody go through a good death and to heal as they're dying. Whereas from a reductionistic standpoint, you'd just be trying to prevent death. You'd be trying to treat something, treat diagnoses, treat diseases and disorders. But with healing, it's more of a humanistic approach where you're looking at the whole person. So let's see, anything else that I wanted to mention here? Yeah, another thing that is crucial in my view of talking about burnout is burnout. It's nice if we can prevent it, that's great, but I also think it's just part of daily life, and it can be part of an initiation into being a healer at a greater depth of growing and healing. So there's a story that I start the book with that comes out of Tibetan Buddhism about Chenrezig. So Chenrezig took a vow to alleviate all suffering in sentient beings, and if he failed, that he vowed to explode into 1,000 pieces. So Chenrezig worked and worked and worked, tried to alleviate as much suffering as possible, helped innumerable beings, but when he stopped and looked around, he realized there was as much suffering as there was when he started, because the idea in Buddhism is that there's infinite beings, and so there's always more beings being born, and even though he alleviated so much suffering, there was even more suffering. So Chenrezig realized that he failed. He burned out. He had compassion fatigue. He lost his soul and exploded into 1,000 pieces. But there was another Buddha, Amitabha, and Amitabha, a Buddha of compassion, came and put Chenrezig back together and said that was a noble vow, but it was impossible. You can't eliminate or alleviate all suffering everywhere all the time for all time. But it's a noble vow, so I'm going to put you back together, but I'm going to give you 1,000 arms so that you can better touch suffering. And I'm going to give you 11 heads or 10 heads, each with 2 eyes, so 20 eyes, 22 eyes, to better see suffering. And so then Amitabha said, take your vow again, but this time don't turn it back upon yourself. Don't turn the pain and suffering back upon yourself, because that only creates more suffering. And so, I've got a little thing on my desk here. This is a typical Chenritzig here. You can see all of the different 1,000 arms and the heads that kind of go up over the top. So, that's the story of Chenritzig. And I tell this story a lot because a few things. You don't have to be perfect. You're going to, if you're in healthcare and you're trying to help people, you're going to fail. People are going to die. People aren't going to get better. We're not omnipotent as physicians and healthcare professionals. As technicians, if we view ourselves as technicians, that failure is a failure of our knowledge and our skill set. But if we're healers, we also look at, well, this is part of life, and this is where we grow in wisdom, not just in knowledge, but we can grow in wisdom ourselves and help others to grow in wisdom as well. So the other thing that I like about this story, it illustrates a point that I've felt about burnout, is we're not just trying to make people productive, efficient machines who never feel suffering. That shouldn't be the goal of a physician, as somebody who can see 20 patients, 30 patients a day in a primary care setting and not be affected by any of it. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, said that for a therapist to be affected, they must be affected by the patient. They must be able to be impressionable in order to make an impression on others, that it's a mutuality, a back and forth for healing, as opposed to a technician, where a technician is just performing something on somebody else, even on kind of an object. It can be, people can be objectified because if the focus is just on the technical aspect, it's not on the human interrelation aspect. So my idea of burnout is, how can we use it to transform pain and suffering in order to grow as healers, or if you're in other professions, to grow as an educator, to grow as a teacher, or to just grow as a human being or a parent, or just to take your suffering that happens in the world. Suffering is part of life, and how do we take it, transform it, and grow from it, instead of being poisoned by it or becoming cynical or bitter? How do we transform that energy from the pain and suffering into the ability to care for others and to care for ourselves? So that's a brief overview, caring for self and others. The idea that I have is that as we care for ourselves, and I put this with a capital S, kind of the self in the sense of not the ego, our body, mind, and emotions, kind of our small self with a lowercase s, but a capital S, self, which contains our heart, which also connects us to other people and contains the spirit of connecting to everything around us. So the idea is that we are, every time that we have suffering in our lives, every time we have disappointment, it's an invitation, it's a door opening for us to work with that and to transform our suffering so that we can become, as Joseph Rael says, become better heart people. So thank you for listening. I'll be recording, there's a number of different exercises or meditations. I'll record each of these separately in upcoming videos. So thank you very much.